Hi,
How you doing, Fabian?
good. How are you?
Good, good, good. So let's wait just a few more minutes here. There's nobody else here.
Sure.
How's things going on the case? Have you looked at it
I
yet?
haven't really started yet. I read through it and it seems to be doable. There's just been a lot going on this week, so
Okay.
I'm trying to
I
cramp it
mean,
all together like towards the end a little bit more.
right. Yeah, I mean, you've got a few more days to work your way through it. Um, at this point, you can see what I'm sharing up there, which is the Caledonia case again. I figured that would be the best use of our time would be to you know, um, go through that again, maybe answer a few questions you might have.
Right.
Maybe I'll run through the questions at the tail end of the case, which once again are similar to the Franklin lumber case. Just so you're comfortable with you know the, all the concepts that we're going through here in these cases, um, and then just kind of throw it open to questions. But yeah, I mean, you know, looks like someone else has joined us. Let's see who this is. Hey, Nina. Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you? Thank
Good.
you.
Thank you very much. By the way, I note that you two are going to be the one of the teams on the final case. Have you started talking about that? I know it's very early for that, but for the what is it the the serial the serial case at the end? I think I want to say I assigned you two together just because you got that German element. I figured it might facilitate communications. Um, but either way, I've got what you two on one team, and then our other three classmates are in the other. So you're the lucky two that come out with the one fewer member. But yeah, anyway, you two will be working together on the what is it, the Great Plains serial, I think is the name of it. But yeah, that's like in our final week. So you know, we're only here in week 5, so you got another month or so until you got to start looking at that. But anyway, I just thought I'd mention that since you're the two people that have decided to join me. Not sure if anyone else is gonna join us, so let's just officially get started. Um, but essentially, I as I was telling Fabian, Nina, I've got the Caledonia case up, sharing that again, the spreadsheet, and I just wanted to go through that again real quickly because it is almost exactly the same as far as the concepts that you have to work on and the questions you have to answer as the Franklin lumber case. So let's just kind of go down. What I can do here is just go right down the spreadsheet. But basically, you get the cost of the equipment that you have to account for. So that's going to be up there at the top. You got a shipping and installation cost, right? And the shipping and installation is something that is part of the grand total capital cost. So it's going to be part of the depreciable base that you're going to be calculating to determine what your depreciation is over the 5-year life of that equipment and the project. Um, you're also going to have an initial increase in net working capital, which is the 100,000 there that's in cell C9. Um, that's going to be an upfront cost that's recaptured along with all the other net working capital investments that you'll be making throughout the 5-year project. It's recaptured at the end. Um, and then as far as how that's determined, the net working capital is 10% of sales. So when you go through the Caledonia spreadsheet, you can see that the net working capital line, that's just a formulaic entry. You enter a formula into that line, and just like you can um, for Franklin Lumber. So you'll have the same sort of a situation there. You know what the tax rate's going to be here? It's 34%. Not sure what it is for Franklin Lumber, but once you come down to an EBIT, or you come up with a pre-tax income, you'll be multiplying that by 34% to come up with your tax provision, which is obviously then deducted to come to a net income. And remember that later on, when you're converting the profit and loss statement into cash, that the tax will impact the cash, right? But the depreciation is added back. I think I should recall asking Fabian that question last week, and he was right on the money with it. But yeah, the depreciation is added back when you're converting the profit and loss statement into a free cash flow statement. Um, the required rate of return, you're gonna need that information later, the 15%, um, when you begin to calculate your net present values and your internal rates of return. Um, the sales price per unit, that's going to help you generate your revenues for years 1 through 4, and then it's slightly different in year 5. You got your variable cost per unit, and that's per unit sold, obviously. So you're going to have a cost of goods sold, or a variable cost per unit that you can calculate as well. That's going to be $180 per unit for each of the 5 years. You got an annual fixed cost, which is your selling, general, and administrative type costs that aren't going to really fluctuate at all with your units sold or your revenue. They're going to be flat right across the board. You know what the depreciable life is, the 5 years. So your capital addition in year 0 is going to be calculated there, summed up, and then divided by 5 to come up with your depreciation expense, and a unit sales factor there. It's just 1 for 1, so that doesn't really impact anything. It's just so that you don't have to do anything fancy or special with your units sold to come up with revenues or your variable costs. Or they're going to be a straight calculation. Um, and then basically, we can talk a little bit about how the P&L here is developed. But you got your units sold as given for years 1 through 5. You got the 70, the 120, the 140, the 80, and the 60. And from there, you just have a bunch of formulas that are going to give you the different line items of the income statement, right? So you got, you for year 1, you're going to have cell D22 times C13. And obviously, it's just going to go right across E22 times C13. C13 is obviously um, the sales price per unit. And if you're just going right across the board, you're going to have your units sold in that row 22. So you can just set all these up as formulas. The same with variable costs, which are also going to be your units sold times your variable cost per unit value. And then you just go right down the line. You got your fixed costs of 200,000 in there for each year. You can come up with a subtotal, although you don't really have to. You can come up with a subtotal there, which is the EBIT, and then layer into the depreciation expense, come up with EBIT. Take your 34% of EBIT to come up with your tax. Come up with your um, actually they don't do that. I'm used to seeing an additional line in there, which is your net income, but you don't really need to do that because it's not really required. Once you get to EBIT, which is your earnings before interest and tax. There's no interest here on anything. There's no borrowings or, no loan values or anything you got to worry about. You just layer on your taxes, and then once you come to that line, you can just add your depreciation back, right? To come up with operating cash flow. And then, you're going to have your working capital requirements down below, which are in row 40. You got the net working capital needs, which were given up above as a percentage of sales. Your liquidation of working capital, which is just your add back, right? And then you've got your change in working capital, which is all that's going to be recaptured in the final year. That's the 2.4 million there. And I think last time I told you that I added this little calculation here to make sure that the change in working capital, everything from the $100,000 investment in year zero all the way to, through to the column G, all of that, plus then whatever would be required to zero all that out, and that turned out to be the 2.4 million in column H. So when you're doing your Franklin lumber case, you might want to do something similar just to make sure all your changes in working capital zero out. Because at the end of the day, in any project, if you are calculating a net working capital requirement, that's not really a hard cash outlay. That's just kind of a surplus or a reserve that's needed to get the project underway and to keep it on course throughout the project. But at the end of the project, you can essentially recapture all that. It's not really cash out the door. And then from there, you get your operating cash flow. You got your working capital that's applied there again. You get your grand total change in capital spending, which in this case is really the $8 million upfront cost. And then from there, you just come up with your free cash flow at the end. So you're going to have your free cash flow. And then from there, you get into the fun calculations of net present value, your internal rate of return, and your modified internal rate of return, which will be based really on the free cash flow line. You can see that, in these formulas here, it's referencing C49 primarily. So you can just look at those. Remember that net present value is a bit of an odd calculation, or at least a unique one, where you've got your initial cash flow, right? And then you have the present values of all the future values of cash inflow that have to be stacked up against it or added together to come up with your net present value. Make sense? You guys good with the concept of net present value? You got your initial cost that's done in or made in year zero. So that's already present value. That's in today's money. That's denominated in today's dollars. Okay. But columns D through H, you've got, $3,956,000 of free cash flow in year one. But that's not really comparable with the 8.1 million that's happening in year zero. You got to present value that. Just like you then have to present value what happens in year two, which is your column E calculation, F, G, and H for years 3, 4, and 5, right? You got to present value all those so that they're, comparable in dollars and can be combined to come up with that grand total net present value. Okay. But yeah, I mean, these are all hopefully fairly straightforward concepts. I'm not going to go through the method two. I mean, it's very similar to method one. And in this case, we we talk about whether you accept the project or not. In this case, you get a net present value, um, which is well into the positive range. 16.7 million is certainly positive. So you would accept that. The internal rate of return is 77%, which is well above the cost of money percentage of the required rate of return, which is 15%. So based on a net present value rule, you would accept. Based on the internal rate of return rule, you would accept because the IRR is greater than the required rate of return or your discount rate. And the same with the modified internal rate of return. That's well above the required rate of return as well. So you would accept this project. So you can make similar calculations when you come to the point where you're working on your Franklin lumber case. And based on the MPV rule, the internal rate of return rule, and the MIRR rule, you can decide whether you're going to accept the Franklin lumber case or not once you come down to the cash flows. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm hoping that this is this is the second time we've gone through it. So, I really want you to do well on these cases. They do represent a pretty large, substantial portion of your grade. So that's why I wanted to go through this again. Do any of you, do either of you have any questions on this? Are you pretty good with it?
Yeah, I
Uh,
have no questions.
I do.
You're good. Hi, Dylan. I see you joined us. Thanks for being with us. I'm not sure at what point you joined us, but I just went through the Caledonia spreadsheet, which once again is very similar to
I
the
joined
Franklin.
pretty far back. I seen most of what you were saying.
Did you good? Okay. I just wanted you to be comfortable with what we're going through again, which is this Caledonia spreadsheet, which I would really recommend that you almost use this as a template. I mean, you could even use this spreadsheet in your Franklin lumber case, just change the numbers around as required. You can use the same spreadsheet certainly for the P&L that you develop and the cash flow that comes out of that, and then just refer to it as you're answering the questions down below. And you guys should be in really good shape with all that. Let's just go through the final questions again. I think they ask about, whether you use or think of what the most important elements of what you're developing here are. Is it the profits or the cash flow? And you got to sort of put the highest priority on the cash flow because that's the basis for determining your net present value and your internal rate of return and your modified internal rate of return. You really need cash flow. Cash flow is what companies can spend. And profit is good, but this is almost like a liquidity versus a profit ranking of priorities for corporations. You certainly want profit, but if you don't have cash, I mean, cash is king, right? So if you don't have cash, you're going to be SOL as a business because you can't pay your bills, right? You know, I think I seem to recall talking about a company I had worked for where you had deferred contract payment terms, and even though we were profitable, the cash flow was all stacked towards the end of long-term contracts as far as our receiving that cash. So a lot of times we were struggling with liquidity issues. So you're going to want to have um, cash flow, and that's pretty much how you're going to answer question A. And then I seem to recall asking Fabian about this one last time we talked about this case. What's going on with depreciation? What do you do with it? Well, you add it back to your bottom line, right? It's not a cash item. You're going to want to add the depreciation expense, which is really just book expense. It's not cash out the door in order to get convert your P&L to a cash flow statement and come up with free cash flow at the end of the day. Question C is asking about sunk costs. Basically, they're exactly as the name describes them. They're sunk. They've been made. They're not going to impact um, a capital budgeting proposal. They've already been spent, so you would ignore them. Okay. So basically, they're saying regardless of the decision made, the sunk costs have already occurred. Okay. And then it just, goes on to ask about, what are some of the cash flows by year. Basically, you're going to determine that you got the 8.1 million, which is the 7.9 million of the actual equipment expense. You got $100,000 of shipping and installation, which is part of the capital cost and part of your depreciable base for that capital asset addition, from which you calculate depreciation. And then you have the $100,000 of net working capital investment that's required to get the project off and running, which you do have to include in your free cash flow line, right? But basically, question E is just a regurgitation of your free cash flow calculation line, so you can just substitute those numbers into to understand what your free cash flow is by year. And I'm not even sure if that question is asked in the Franklin lumber case, but if it is, you'll have the answer. It'll be readily available. And then the question F on terminal cash flow, it's equal to any salvage value. In this case, they said there was no salvage value, so you don't have to worry about that. And then the recapture of the working capital of 1.56 million, which occurs in year 5. If we go up here, that's what's happening here. I'll go up here instead, because remember the 1.56 million is part of what makes this line here, this change in working capital. It helps get to the point. What makes this little calculation out here zero is, remember, the change in working capital is something that's going to zero out in total, because essentially you're recapturing all that investment or your use of working capital in the project. You're recapturing all that at the end. So that's that. Then getting down into the rest of this, you're going to be calculating what the net present value is based on your free cash flow. You're going to be calculating the internal rate of return. Same with the modified internal return. Once again, all based on your free cash flow. Are you going to accept these? We just talked about that. Yeah, based on the fact that your net present value is positive and that your internal rate of return and your modified internal rates of return are all favorable to the required rate of return or the discount rate you're using. Getting into some other questions here, they just talk about, understand what total project risk is, understand what project standalone risk is. You can either look at this comment here, what systematic risk is, what contribution to firm risk is. You can either look at this little comment here in the spreadsheet, or you can even read more about it either in the text, or you could also look it up on the internet. But yeah, basically it's that. What else we got? The ideas of what's involved with simulation, what's sensitivity analyses, all these things are discussed here, and you can use them once again if they're asked in the Franklin lumber case. So I'm hopeful that and forgive me. I mean, if we've kind of been through all this before, but like I said, I want to make sure that you're, you know, at the risk of beating all this to death, that you're really comfortable with the idea of capital budgeting. It's one of the key elements of this course, and a key component to that's really going to arm you. I mean, if you ever go in a role in financial analysis professionally in any way, knowing the concepts of time value of money, which is the inherent in the calculations of net present value and internal rate of return, modified internal rate of return. Understanding what the time value of money means to project analysis, actually being able to use these capital evaluation techniques and how to arrive at the cash flows that go into those calculations is really important. So, you guys can forgive me for kind of beating a dead horse here and really maybe overemphasizing this. But to be honest, a lot of these same concepts are gonna pop up in the final case, the cereal company that I think it's Great Plains. That case, our final case at the end of the course. So, you'll be able to apply a lot of these same concepts to that case too. So that's that. Any other questions? Are you guys good with this?
I would have one more question.
Yes.
Because I looked at the Word document and there's not a lot of information given compared to the Caledonia case. Do we have another Excel spreadsheet or some more information? Because I had difficulties like calculating everything because I was missing some of the numbers, I feel like.
Okay, so you're referring specifically to the Great Plain. I'm sorry, the Franklin Lumber write-up.
Yeah, because you
Okay,
said we could use the Caledonia case as kind of like a template, but I
right.
feel like there's not enough info in order to do that.
I'll tell you what, how about if you let me make that a follow-up point? I'll go back through that very carefully because to be honest, I haven't even really looked at the Franklin Lumber case. Um, Instead, I've just really focused on Caledonia and sort of made the grand assumption that it's almost
Mhm.
the same. But if it's not, or whatever, elements are really different, I'll take a look at those and I'll kind of, supply either some additional notes on calculations or just conceptually so that you can you know
It was somewhat similar, but it's missing like the networking capital. Like there was nothing within the lumber one about any networking capital or anything regarding
oh,
that.
okay. If that's not there, then that's would potentially be an element you could ignore. But yeah, let me just make sure of that. And what I'll do is I'll link up Caledonia, right, to Franklin Lumber. Um, as far as any notes or if any additional calculations are required, um, I can. I don't want to give them away, right? But I'll point you in the right direction and give you some hints and some ideas. Sound good?
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Yeah, sure. Any other questions? Dylan, Fabian, you guys pretty good with this now?
Yep, pretty good.
Yeah.
Good, great. Well, good. Then I look forward to it. I'll turn you guys loose in just a couple seconds. Um, yeah, I mean we're moving along through the course. Everybody seems to be doing. All you guys seem to be doing pretty well. Obviously we got this case and then two more following it, which these three cases make up a lion's share of your grade. But I mean, so far so good. Everything seems to be going pretty smoothly. So yeah, I mean, as we continue to roll on, just let me know if you have any questions or if there's any things that you would like me to focus on and our next several Zoom meetings. Just let me know. If not, then I'll just try to continue to prepare you for the cases as they roll out. Obviously, I've been hammering away on this Caledonia example, but I can't remember the name of the next case. But it'll be coming up in a couple of weeks, and then before the Great Plains case at the end, I will, I'll do my best to prepare you for those as well as we move through. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm going to turn you guys loose here. Have a great weekend. We'll see you Monday. Good luck on your case. Remember that the Franklin lumber case is due on Sunday night. And if you do have any additional questions before then, let me know. And I will take one last peek through the Franklin lumber case, and I'll tie it back to Caledonia with any differences that you might have to be aware of or might have to adjust for or might have to prepare something a little bit different for. I'll certainly provide some hints and some ideas on how to address those issues. Okay. So on that note, I'm going to turn you loose. All three of you guys, I'll see you in about 3 hours, right? 2.5 hours for our next Zoom meeting. So we'll see you then, and enjoy your time until then. Okay.
Thank you. See you later.
Okay, guys. See you later on today. Bye bye.
you.